Tonight's story is brought to you in part by MissLord.com for some of the history, ppwr.net for the Denis dates, GuruArchives.com for the surface history corresponding to the Denis dates, and the Convertian Calendar Converter, which is written by Brett Middleton of the Fuzzy Physics Institute for converting between Denis and surface time. Tonight's story is from Myst, the Book of Atrus. As I've told these stories, we've learned about life in the cavern. We learned how the Denis came from the proud roots, seeking to shed their pride, yet pride crept back into their lives. We watched it cause the downfall of their great empire. We watched as a mother and her young son made their way to the surface from the ruins of Denis. A mother, Anna, grieving for the loss of her soulmate, and her son, Gen, angry at his mother for, he believed, leaving his father behind. Last time, we learned about Gen's adolescent life. So consumed with anger at his mother over his misconceptions of his father's fate, he refused to listen to her teachings, paying them little more than lip service until he was old enough to head out on his own. Not only was he full of anger, but he became a very impatient child. He lamented that his learning the secrets of Denis writing from the guild masters had been cut short, though I am sure that Anna tried her best to teach him patience and care. Her efforts were for naught. Her words fell on deaf ears. In his mind, she had nothing valid or of any intrinsic worth to teach him. In his mind, she was the root cause of his world having fallen apart. Instead of patience, he was impatient, choosing easy paths even though they may not be the correct ones. Where his paths would become blocked, he chose to use brute force to overcome his obstacles rather than use reason and logic. Tonight, we will learn of his son and of Anna's second attempt to raise a good and decent child, one with the knowledge of his forebears, but without their prideful influence. Our story opens in the Denis year of 9411. Approximately 1755 AD, the year that Major General Edward Braddock was defeated at Fort Duquesne during the French and Indian War. Gen's wife, Keta, had just died in childbirth. Without bothering to name his son, Gen left the cleft without a second thought. The wisps of the morning fog were swirling around the upper reaches of the volcano. Walking through the mist as a ghostly specter, he disappeared over the rim of the caldera on his way to Denis, to what he felt was his true home. Left alone with her grandson, she decided to raise him as she had been raised, but mindful of his Denis heritage. In the Denis tradition of naming children after a well-respected family member, she named him after his grandfather, her beloved husband. She named him Atrus. She also taught him to be mindful of his surroundings. She constantly asked him, "What do you see, Atrus?" just as her father had done with her. Life in the desert was hard and unforgiving. They toiled together during the day, tending their meager garden. Every square inch of the cleft that was available to be cultivated was. At night were his studies. Atrus had a dual benefit. Anna taught him from the books her father had used to teach her, the ones that were brought from Europe when they moved to that desolate place so many years before. She also told him stories of his Dani heritage, stories of a great empire that fell due to pride. One of Atrus's favorite stories was that of Kerith, not of the king who abdicated his throne to the Dani council. Rather, it was of a young Kerith, the boy who was banished into exile to live his days in the great underground desert of Tremurti, the place of poisoned waters. Later, she mused about herself, thinking that if one were to, quote, give her a blank page, she would fill it with a poem or a story or a picture. Give her a blank wall, and she would decorate it. Give her a child, and she would fill its head with marvels and tales and thoughts and facts beyond imagining. Close quote. One day, when Atrus was 7, Anna purchased a surprise for Atrus from the caravan of traders that periodically passed through that region. It was a small orange kitten named Paquette. It was an ancient name, and a lucky one at that. However, since his coat was the color of the desert sand at sunset, young Atrus decided to name him Flame. The two bonded almost immediately, and from that moment on were inseparable. Atrus grew to be very observant of his surroundings. Eventually, his inquisitive mind compelled him to start conducting his own experiments. One of his first ones was watching the movement of a sand dune. When his measurement was finished, he told Anna about it. Of course, she started off by asking, "What did you see, Atrus?" She was impressed by his observation. That, and the fact that he was even able to go so far as to be able to explain why it moved, and why the sand was hard-packed on the windward side and loose on the leeward side. Atrus was slowly growing up, and she cherished every moment that he grew in intellect and maturity, even during those occasions when hard lessons were learned. One day, when Atrus was 10 years old, he saw his very first desert rainstorm. During the rain, Anna's memories were taken back to a time when she and Atrus, her husband, danced together in the rain on a world they called Gamadet. Atrus was amazed at the flowers that seemed to bloom almost immediately. Even more amazing was the vegetation that grew more lush near one of the volcano's active vents. Using that dirt, he grew a special crop of their shoots in it. After harvesting the crop, he noticed his cat Flame playing in the dirt where the shoots had been. He tasted one of the raw shoots. It had a bitter, metallic aftertaste. He rinsed them off more thoroughly. Unfortunately, the damage had been done. He got violently ill, but he survived. More unfortunately, Flame did not. It was a hard lesson for him to have to learn. Anna watched how, in a dignified manner, he carefully picked up the tiny animal, carried it to a patch of blue flowers, and buried it. She watched as he kept in all that he was feeling and knew in that moment that he had shed something of his childhood. He had taken a step further into adulthood and a step further away from her. Please join us next week as we learn about Atrus' teenage years, his life with Anna, and a surprise visit from someone in their past. And thank you all for coming tonight.